Many residents understand that corruption is a big issue, and a report released by the U.S. has accused the police, military, and Department of State Services of corruption and behaving with impunity. The 2021 country reports on human rights practices for Nigeria say these security forces remain a significant problem and that there are credible reports of human rights abuses. A few days ago, President Muhammadu Buhari pardoned ex-governors Joshua Dariye and Nyame and 157 others from serving jail time for corruption on the grounds of health and age. These pardons were met with widespread backlash. So, how will Nigeria address rampant corruption, and what's the way forward? Well, let's bring in Arise analyst, Associate Professor of Law, Sam Amadi, to give in his analysis on these issues. I want to ask you, when you look at the Council of State pardon of those two governors and 157 others, we don't still have their names yet. But constitutionally, they have the right, the president has that right of prerogative of mercy. Why the hula baloo?
Well, very good question. If you look at the Nigerian model, the US model, the US model gives the president unlimited prerogative. That means the president doesn't need to consult anybody. The president, everybody will be waiting at the last days and asking themselves, which criminal will be pardoned this time around? So it will be like the magician from the hat. The president will bring out names of oftentimes financiers, close friends who have taken the bullet, who have done some shady things for the presidency. We saw that with both Obama, Clinton, and lately Trump. The difference that Nigerian constitution says that you don't have this discretion alone. The president has to first set up a prerogative of mercy committee, which prescribes some kind of evidential work. So they go to prisons and look at deserving cases. Then you call the council and provide a memo. Now, what that means is that our own constitution, rightly, more than the American own, thinks that questions of criminal justice requires some degree of due process. And so, oftentimes, persons maybe who are involved in error, some crime like maybe anger, somebody kills his wife, and the kids are young, and then they're going to lose their parents. Those are some of the compassionate grounds for exercising those powers. Now, the problem with this is two hefty guys, politicians, top former governors, who would not have any record of great illness. For example, a day after the pardon, it was reported that the governor of Plateau State,
former Plateau State governor, Dariye, had collected
a senatorial a form to run for Senate to the parties. Okay, so the notion here is it's like you are first undermining the message around corruption, and by the way, arguably, Constitution debars people who have been convicted for corruption-related offenses that touch on moral character for good reason. Other crimes, ticketing, traffic offenses that touch on negligence are exempted. So the Constitution understands that corruption is a central public issue that should not be allowed. So for it now to pardon governors who were convicted, of course, for stealing a lot of money and confirmed at appellate court, what that means that somehow you are undermining the strong message around corruption. And again is, if you look at Atushe was rejected. He stole private money. The question now is, why do you have to pardon public officers when the major crisis of Nigerian development is arguably public corruption?
And these two ex-governors, were accused of embezzling more than 2 billion naira. Well, let's look at not just the morality of it, the impact this is going to have on the justice system for a case that so much money was expended on by the federal government to prosecute from the lower court to the highest court. Isn't it demoralizing for those judges, justices, the agencies that even investigated them and coming to getting convictions? It looks like a joke.
Absolutely. So, for example, it has a chilling effect on even the EFCC. So the idea is, because part of the strategy of containing perverse corruption. It should target big guns. So it's like has a cascading effect. So once don't go after this, and that's what American.
That's the American U.S. report says that deriding EFCC and ICPC for going for lower, just middle
dispensable,
and we see Nigerians openly stealing billions,
and nobody's going after them,
and they are being pardoned.
Now that they have been convicted by a court that normally they escape, oftentimes because of good lawyering, corruption in the judiciary, these big actor criminals.
Well, you wouldn't say you wouldn't be talking about corruption in the judiciary now in this instance.
That's the point.
It won't be fair.
I agree with you. I'm saying that even when we have succeeded in convicting one, the rate of conviction is very low. If you look at the cases we go to court, look at Oji's Okali's case. Retrial is going on. Okay, now that we have convicted two major two governors for corruption, why should we pardon them? So basically, apart from the fact that the morality side of it, it calls to question the idea of equal rights. You see, prerogative of mercy should be exercised on clear, reviewable grounds so that it's open to many people. So for example, you can say compassion, very old age, terminal diseases. So in those cases, it's not based on an individual. Now, if you don't do that, you're creating both a sense of inequality, a sense of impunity and privilege, which is what sustains public corruption. So in a sense, this is dramatically cutting at the heart of the anti-corruption war. You've spent money, you demoralize agencies that do this prosecution, because who knows who will get the reprieve next time when a new government comes to power, and so on and so forth. So that level of, that's why, for example, in China, in many countries of the world, they provide more than stiff penalty for public corruption. And the idea is not just to punish people, but to create general deterrence. Now, when you say we can't pardon anybody who commits corruption, that sets an example that if you are caught and you are convicted, you don't have a second option to come and play politics. Now, it's really ridiculous, silly, if you like, somebody argued. For somebody who has had a jail term for corruption, the next morning, he is a candidate with the full rights and privileges restored for him to go back to public office. So the question then is, the idea of conviction and debarment from public office is to make two statements: that this person is not qualified to be a public officer, and secondly, to warn those who may be tempted to go in that path to know that they're going to suffer a major disability if they go that path. And now, people will now say, you probably won't suffer much if you can get the governor or the president to pardon you. And then again, you raise a point to do your intro. The list of those by now, once you grant this pardon, government should have made it public, gazetted it, and oftentimes you want to know who got pardoned, and then you can trace the history, whether they got pardoned because of the peculiarity of their case, because sometimes because of recommendation by maybe civil society groups, or sometimes judges themselves, or they got pardoned because of direct connection to very high profile political office holders. So the idea of corruption, by the way, don't forget, is not just stealing money, is using public rules to benefit private interests. And so if you use the power of prerogative of mercy to set off the big and the powerful and the mighty at the detriment of the poor, those who have no access, then that's another level of public corruption, not just stealing money. What I mean therefore is that in this pardon, government itself is enacting a form of corruption. They are using exactly the resources of the state to benefit private persons inordinately.
Professor Sam Amadi, a rights analyst and professor of law, thanks so very much for coming on Newsnight.